Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Bloodbed channel. I'm Josh Williams, and this is the David Hughes episode of the month, first episode of September. So, Dave, welcome back, mate.
Yeah, thank you, mate. It's good to be back. Been a few weeks, hasn't it? So nice to be back on the show at long last. But it does feel a while ago since I was back on. I won't lie.
It's extremely well timed as well. We have Everton this weekend, and
Mm.
Liverpool are actually buying players, or loaning players at least. So, we have a favour to talk about, but yeah, it's a good time, mate, isn't it?
Yeah. Obviously, Merseyside derby this weekend. I
How you
should have
feel?
timed it better, actually, mate. I've not done that quite well. How am I feeling? Pretty much the same as I do before every Merseyside derby. Expect very little, and that's normally what comes to fruition. But you never know. I think I'm finding Liverpool, as we'll probably get onto, very strange this year.
Yeah.
So, I guess in previous years I've been very confident of a Liverpool victory. I still am, but yeah, there's a strangeness about Liverpool this season so far. So perhaps there might be something different that the narrative throws up, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into it anyway. I thought this episode would be a talk about Liverpool's recent form. It's gonna be, but I didn't expect Liverpool to be doing business. Liverpool seem to be. I mean, we are recording on deadline day. By the time this podcast comes out, the deal could have collapsed. We never know really. But as of right now, at least, Liverpool seem to be negotiating a season-long loan for Arthur Melo, who is at Juventus. So before we kind of talk about matters on the pitch, Newcastle United, Everton, and all that stuff, we have to obviously tackle the major news of the day, and that is Arthur. So, how are you feeling about that one, mate? You surprised or?
I am surprised, yeah. I suppose somewhat typically Liverpool have done a great job of keeping this off the radar. They seem to do that really well. One of the best clubs for it, which when I've been on the show, we've praised in the past, haven't we? Saying it's quite a good thing to do. It doesn't really give your rivals any kind of indication that you're looking at a certain player, which can make it a little bit easier to get a deal over the line. Obviously, this is a little bit different, though, because I see him as a player who, isn't someone I'd imagine Liverpool to bring in permanently. It does very much, for me, feel like it's a kind of stopgap, consequence of the circumstances, just an extra body and the best possible option that maybe is available at this time to bring into the midfield, especially, obviously Henderson picking up a knock himself against Newcastle. So I would be interested to know how far down the line this one was, or when this one actually started to materialise in terms of Liverpool formalising their interest, because it wouldn't surprise me if it was this week, as opposed to in the past where it's been ongoing.
What I've heard is Liverpool contacted Juventus at midnight last night. So it is very much a late one. I've got lots of thoughts on this actually, but I think first of all, just touching on what you've just mentioned there in terms of this being a stopgap, I have no real issues with that, if I'm honest. I would rather Liverpool, if it's a short-term fix, I would rather it be a definite short-term fix where the lad leaves in a year than Liverpool going by a midfielder who they don't want long-term. Say, for example, Douglas Luiz was linked. I would rather Liverpool loan someone to plug the gap who is not part of the long-term plan than buy a lad who's not part of the long-term plan. So the whole loaning for the season, I don't mind that much. In terms of the player, I think it's interesting actually. It is an interesting move because if you look at what he is, for me, he's as much of a clone as you're possibly getting at this stage in the window, at least for Thiago. And I think this looks like a very obvious move to kind of reduce the impact of Thiago's absence on this team, because this team is nowhere near the same in terms of control and fluidity, building from the back, all that stuff when Thiago was on the sidelines. And, you can bring in the likes of Milner, Curtis Jones, whoever it may be, Jordan Henderson even. They don't offer what Thiago does. They're not that conductor who dictates the tempo and just keeps the ball and those basic elements really that are quite hard to do if you look at it. Arthur is he is a version of that type of player. He is that kind of controller. He's not Thiago's level, but he is technically very good. And I mean, do you agree with that sort of line? Is that what you're thinking? Because that was my immediate thought.
I think he definitely alleviates some of that pressure. I just find him hard to compare to Thiago because I just don't think he's anywhere near as good in my personal opinion. And I see what you're saying. You're not saying he is. You're saying he's a clone in terms of a profile, which to some extent I do agree. But yeah, I just don't think
like just to elaborate on that. Just say, for example, a few years back when Liverpool had Robertson, the alternative to Robertson was Milner. Now, if you compare those two, Milner is, a 35-year-old right-footed player who isn't particularly quick, isn't a threat in behind. Robertson was a younger, left-footed Duracell bunny who ran in behind all the time. So Liverpool had two totally different profiles for the left-back spot, for example. What we mean by profiles is, in this case, if Thiago comes out the team and Arthur comes into the team, in terms of the makeup of the team, at least, it doesn't shift as much as it does if you take Thiago out and bring in a Curtis Jones. That's kind of what I mean by that. Like,
yeah. So I see that element to him. I think you said he dictates tempo. I agree. I think he's fairly decent in terms of getting himself out of a hole when he's pressed. I just don't. From what I've watched of him, and even when I was having a look at the numbers, I just don't think he's got that kind of penetrative kind of element to him in possession. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you've seen something I haven't, but just that's one big thing I think's missing from his game if we're looking at the two players.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, the best way I can put it, right? I think I had a look at the numbers earlier. Past couple of episodes, mate. We've spoke quite a bit on the most basic statistic in the world, which is pass completion. And how in certain games, particularly when the pressure gets turned up, the likes of Henderson and Milner just tend to lose the ball a lot. And that's all right if you're Trent. It's all right if you're Salah. It's not all right if you're responsible for establishing a foothold on the game in the middle of the park. If there's one department that Arthur shines in the numbers, it is keeping the ball. He just doesn't give the ball away ever. Similar to Thiago in that sense. The issue is Thiago, while keeping the ball, also moves it forward a lot. And Thiago will keep the ball while also finding the most valuable areas of the pitch with his passing. Arthur keeps the ball to a slightly better level than Thiago, according to the numbers at least. But in terms of moving the ball forward, it's about half as much. I think that season Thiago was averaging about 10 progressive passes per 90. Arthur over the past year is averaging 5.1 per 90, which is not that bad. It's just half of Thiago. So it's like before Thiago in this role, we had Wijnaldum in the role, and Wijnaldum offered ball retention. He kept the ball a lot, never give the ball away, but Wijnaldum never moved the ball forward. He was just not a progressive passer at all. So if you put Wijnaldum at one end of the scale, Thiago at the other end of the scale, Arthur is almost bang in the middle.
Yeah, that's what I agree with. I mean, I was looking at the fact that he'd made the second most successful passes per 90 in the Juventus squad last season, and I was thinking straight away that probably signals to me that he's not going to be someone who takes a lot of risks on the ball. But then for that position, is that what you want? Not really. You want that solidity to build through. Again, just the reason I wanted to flag the differences with Thiago was I just think Thiago does that, but then will find a pass in the smallest of openings that maybe
Yeah,
someone else wouldn't. I don't think we're going to get that from him. I
no,
think he probably won't progress it as well. So what you're kind of getting is a solid midfielder who'll be decent in possession, but maybe just not having that edge that Thiago has. And then obviously there's stuff on them without the ball as well.
yeah. Well, in possession, he is a lot more of what I would probably label as a sideways man. Just for a bit of perspective on that, Dave, right? While I'm speaking, open up Wisecout and check on his most recent passing network against Villarreal in the Champions League, and you'll see exactly what I mean when I say he is a sideways man. So yeah, as we say, in terms of moving the ball forward into the dangerous zones like Thiago does, we're not going to see as much of that, but he will offer the control, if you like, in the middle of the park that Liverpool are definitely lacking at the minute. For a bit of perspective on his ability to essentially keep the ball over the past 4 seasons, in 2 of them have been in Serie A, 2 of them have been in La Liga. He's attempted 4,136 passes, and of those, he's completed 92.3% of them. In all 4 of those seasons, his pass completion hasn't dropped below 90% in any of those seasons. Now, again, it's really basic. No, these are basic numbers. It offers no insight into the value he's providing with those passes. But what I'm trying to get at is, if Liverpool are lacking control, and you've got a player there who just naturally does keep the ball, and he's a bit press resistant. He's cool when he's under pressure. He doesn't bottle it or anything like that. I do think Liverpool can benefit from a player like that, specifically when Thiago's injured. Did you check the network?
Yeah, I'm just laughing at it, mate, because it's it's. I mean, I noticed it's the one game where he's really kind of exceeded something ridiculous. Like, how many passes was it?
Over
Yeah,
100,
over
wasn't it?
100. Yeah,
Yeah.
94% pass completion. But then when you have a look, and it's a shame we can't really share it with people listening and watching, but yeah, it's just very one side to the other. Which again, we're not saying isn't a bad thing. It depends on what your role is in the side.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's his
Exactly.
role, then he's not doing anything wrong. But just as a profile, it seems like he's maybe just going to lack that edge a little bit. But I get it. Look, I don't want to sound too negative. I think it's a solid. I thought what your points that we didn't maybe elaborate more on at the start was very good. That Liverpool aren't going to burden themselves with a player who they're going to have to spend money on, plus wages. I think he's going to be on big wages and potentially be stuck with that player for 2 or 3 years when he's clearly not going to be in the long-term plans. But it's an obvious short-term fix. If everybody comes in and gets fit again, he doesn't play. If they don't, then you've got a kind of solid solution there, ready to come in and probably adapt fairly easily to how Liverpool want to play.
Yeah. I mean, if Liverpool bought this player, I would probably be concerned. Even if he does really well this season, I'm going to say now, if he does really well, I probably still don't want the club to buy him, because I don't like using the same injury prone, but he does get injured often. And in terms of what he offers as a player, he's just a controller. That's kind of it. There's nothing else to his game really. He's very good at it. He is very technical, and same height as Thiago, good in tight spaces. He's very similar in many ways. But it's kind of all he's about really.
Yeah.
Like I'll be amazed if he scores for Liverpool in the
Yeah.
next year. I don't think he'll get a single goal. I'm not expecting that from him.
No, I think when I looked, there was no goals, no assists in Serie A last season, and there was also very little in the way of even shot creating actions. Compared to the rest of the squad, he was probably, I'd say, bottom 25%. I mean, that's all positions, so it's hard to compare it like that. But just as a snapshot, he was quite low down. And again, we know, don't we, Josh, that could just be his role in the side, but it'll be very similar, I imagine, at Liverpool.
Yeah, it's sticky, isn't it? Because we obviously, I'm always conscious whenever Liverpool buy a player, we probably talk about the negatives a lot more than your typical cheerleading podcast, maybe, or something like that. But we're just trying to analyze what the player offers, what the player does, and generally he is a controller, and I think Liverpool need a controller, especially when Thiago's not there, which is pretty often. So I don't dislike the deal. I think him on loan for a year is fine, and I think Liverpool will benefit from his presence, particularly when Liverpool are facing teams like Bournemouth, Newcastle, probably Palace, Fulham, especially Fulham, because that was a bit of a heated exchange in the middle of the park. That, but when Liverpool are facing the better sides, I don't know if he's defensively. He's put it this way, he's not a workhorse. He's not
No.
not that he's lazy, but he like I messaged the lad today who I've had on Twitter for a while, Barcelona fan, and I just messaged him saying, so Arthur Melo, tell me he isn't terrible. And he just replied with a bit of insight around him and things like that. But one of the things he said was he struggled during intense games. Usually after 60 minutes, he can't really press anymore. I'd say his weaknesses are more in the physical department. So it doesn't really fit with a typical Liverpool player. But again, I need to highlight, what will Liverpool expect from him? When will Liverpool be using him? So I can't see him like starting against, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an intense Manchester City, someone like that. I don't know, but it's
I
going to be
think he's
interesting
going
to
to,
see how Liverpool use.
yeah. I think his importance is going to be when Liverpool are going to be, I don't know, at home against a team who's just going to sit in a low block. They're going to have so much of the ball. Defensive actions be few and far between. I think that'll be perfect for him because you are right. I mean, what your mate says there, that sounds pretty correct. And then you think he's coming into the Premier League. He's only 5'8", I think he is.
Yeah,
It's not a big size really when you think of the midfielders in the Premier League. And by no means am I saying that you need to be big to be successful as a midfielder in the Premier League. We know a lot of technical players who aren't, who are still fantastic, but I think it does definitely give you an advantage in terms of your work off the ball, and that's where you could struggle a little bit, but certainly it'll be on it where you can still play an important role in the next season.
yeah. He is kind of that player who, similar to Thiago, he can play the left side of the number 8 role, but then as Liverpool's system kind of shapes when the team are attacking, he can kind of slot in next to Fabinho as that double six almost at times. He's not going to be in the final third at all. He's very much a middle third man. And it's Liverpool seem to know that. Liverpool seem to want that kind of player, and alternatives to that were players who you were probably going to have to buy for a fair amount, like Ruben Neves, Yuri Tillemans. Arthur offers arguably a better degree of control than they do, and he's just coming for a year and then getting off basically if everything goes according to plan. So yeah, I don't hate the deal. I mean, what are your thoughts on the deal out of 10 or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, look, I think it's about.
I mean, we're getting linked with Douglas Luiz, getting linked with Conrad Lima,
Yeah.
and I mean,
I,
I don't
I
think it's
think
a bad.
no. I think it's probably a wiser deal. Making no big commitments. And what I don't want to see is suddenly everybody kind of applauding this as a master stroke. I think we can call a spade and say, they realised last night they need a player in, and they've obviously maybe had a short list of potential available options, because that's what Klopp was talking about only last week, wasn't he? That the problem is there's midfielders you want, just are not available. Well, they've obviously got a list of potential available ones, and of that list, Arthur probably ranks top. I can't imagine many others who'd be available the way he is. So, on that basis, I'm torn between maybe like 6.5, 7 out of 10. I just don't think he's going to be. Obviously, he's not going to be a transformational signing by by any stretch, but what loan signing is. Does he have does he have reinforcements to the midfield? Yes. Does he look like he can kind of adapt to playing within Liverpool's midfield? Yes. Has he got proven experience at the highest level, Premier League top 5 league, Champions League? Yes. So on those bases, I think it ticks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, I think overall he will lessen the hit from no Thiago, and that's valuable. That's important for us this season because I mean, you just touched on masterstroke there. I actually think just moving the conversation up maybe a little bit away from Arthur on Liverpool's summer. What do you think of Julian Ward's first window? Seeing you up there.
Let me bring up Liverpool's business on in front of me now.
I mean, in terms of incomings, it's Arthur on loan for the season on deadline day. Darwin Núñez, obviously, Calvin Ramsey and Fabio Carvalho for buttons.
Yeah, so I really liked the business, to be honest, done. There's nothing really I don't like there. Obviously,
I think what my issue, I think what I'm maybe getting at is, I think Liverpool have been weirdly reactionary since the bad start of the season, and I think this almost scramble for a midfielder is just a bit uncharacteristic. I'm not sure. I don't want to put too much of an emphasis on Julian Ward and like that, but it wasn't really something that we witnessed under Edwards too much.
You say that, but obviously, if you think about the centre back stuff at the back end of the January window last year, that was I do feel like there's some parallels there between the two.
Yeah, there definitely is. Yeah, that's a good point. But with this being a summer window, we obviously went for Tchouaméni, didn't get him, and it did seem to be a case of right, we can't get Tchouaméni, close the book, and then it's like we closed the book and thought right, Bellingham next summer, and then we've realised now in the past couple of weeks and opened the book again, and kind of done a little bit of a Man United almost, where the results don't go your way, and you have to enter the market to solve a problem that is maybe a little bit worse than you anticipated. I don't know. I don't want to go too harsh, but
yeah. Let me put a question to you though. Do you think that decision is results based, or do you think that decision is as a result of the injuries that Liverpool have had?
I think it's a bit of both. Actually, I think it's a bit of both. I think if in those first 3 games things go according to plan and Liverpool, let's say they win all 3, because I suppose we expected them to be Fulham, we expected them to be Palace, and who else did we have?
Bournemouth, yeah. So there's been
I mean that obviously went according to plan.
Yeah.
But I think if that happens, maybe Liverpool just kind of worry a bit less. I don't know.
It was United, sorry, wasn't it? I think.
Oh yeah, it was United.
Like Liverpool fans tried to put that one out of mind, but yeah, it was in there as well.
Yeah, well there you go. That was another one. Didn't really go according to plan at all. We lost that game, so I don't know. It just feels a tiny bit uncharacteristic. I think. Yeah, don't know.
I do see what you're saying. I definitely do. I think that the scream's a little bit of a U-turn on it.
I mean, what I'm getting at is, right, Liverpool have needed to upgrade their midfield department for a few years now. We obviously got Thiago in 2020, but again, Thiago, when he arrived, was 29. So regardless, Liverpool have had this pressing need to buy a 22 to 25-year-old midfielder for a few seasons now. And quite a few top players have moved. Like Bruno Guimaraes is really, really good in my opinion. I think he's top player. I think he'd be great for Liverpool. Can play as a 6, can play as an 8. Intense, good age. Went to Newcastle. And there's been a few other movements as well. And I think even earlier in the summer, I kind of tipped my hat a little bit to Ibrahim Sangare, who's a PSV. He signed a new contract on August 7th to extend his stay until 2027. And I do wonder that if Liverpool hadn't closed the book, they could have went for him before he signed that new contract and realistically got him for about 30 million. And I think Liverpool have maybe come back to the table now, late, and realised on a few of our targets have gone here. You know, Nunes went to Wolves. Don't know if Liverpool were ever in for him, but I don't know. I feel like we've come back to the market at a bad time, maybe, and it hasn't really delivered the best result.
Yeah, and especially with it being at the very end of the window, it's even worse, isn't it?
Yeah. But Liverpool have got lots of options in midfield. It's just a case of they have missed a lot of. I know the desire to always get the right man, and I know it is difficult to send a newsletter out on that this week as to why lots of players just aren't the right player. But I find it hard to believe, seeing the number of players who've moved in the past year or two, midfielders who apply to Liverpool, that Liverpool have kind of just let leave. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but
No,
I just expect the absolute elite from Liverpool's recruitment based on previous years. You know what I mean?
yeah. You don't expect to be in a scramble.
Yeah, that's it. And
Yeah.
you know, when you're involved in deadline day deals, I don't know. It's just
As we said, though, I mean, if we're going to finish this segment, at least finish it on a high, in that at least it's only a loan move, isn't it? You know, it's not as if they're getting potentially paying 25 million for.
yeah, that's it. Don't want to go too harsh. Like, it's just a case of Liverpool maybe being a tiny bit uncharacteristic compared to previous years. But in terms of Arthur, it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. As I said, he's the console that Liverpool don't have when Thiago's injured, and Thiago's injured too often. So yeah, it'll be a nice addition, I think. Unless there's anything you want to add on that one, Dave, I just want to have a quick chat about, you referenced earlier on that Liverpool are having a bit of a strange season. What do you mean?
Well, we touched on it before, but obviously there's been some bizarre results. Certainly, you know, the first 3 games, and I mean, even the last 2 have been very bizarre, but for different reasons. Obviously, 9-0 is an insane scoreline. And then, you know, I did watch the game. Obviously, we're recording on Thursday. I watched the Newcastle game, and it looked a very kind of frustrating evening, performance-wise. Obviously, I know Liverpool have got on the right side of the result in the end, but obviously conceding first again, which has been an ongoing trend, which was only really booked on Saturday against a poor Bournemouth side. Concede first again, find a way back into the match, and then, you know, really lucky not to concede that second, you know, very tight margins, and then a kind of last gasp winner, which, you know, feel fantastic. I think they do a lot for morale, but, you know, as we like to point out on this show, it's me. We try and talk a little bit more about the performance aspect of things, and yeah, just not what you're expecting from Liverpool. I expected parallels to how Manchester City have started coming into the new season, and we just haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I agree. We have looked at off it. I know we don't want to be too down because Liverpool have won 2 in a row now. But the Newcastle game, I thought, was quite fortunate to get away with 3 points there a little bit. I think I thought Liverpool's build-up, particularly against Newcastle, wasn't very good. Liverpool's building from the back. We just look like we've encountered problems maybe, and Van Dijk and whatever centre half he's playing with look like they're almost without options at times. And I had a little think about that and thought, like, I think you can put a lot of that down to the fact that we don't have Matip in the team, and I think Matip is a natural, almost solution to build up from the back, because when he's the free man, he will just carry the ball until someone closes him down. Gomez is a bit less inclined to do that. Van Dijk doesn't do it. So I think we're missing Matip a little bit in that sense. And I also think when it comes to Liverpool's midfielders, Fabinho's been trying to do it a little bit. But in terms of, again, Thiago, we haven't had that player who's been helping out with the first phase, basically. I think Elliott can do that sort of thing, but he's just a bit more inclined to drift towards the final third than the defensive third, Elliott. So I think the first phase of Liverpool's build-up has been a little bit, I don't know, just encountering a few issues a little bit. I don't know what the word is. Not particularly
Disjointed.
cohesive and disjointed is a good word. Yeah, I think Van Dijk's been hitting maybe a few more long balls than he should. Trent's been forcing a few passes, and as a result of us losing the ball after those passes, because we haven't really had the stability in the middle of the park, we've been just kind of conceding more counter attacks, more dangerous counter attacks than usual. Maybe. Go on.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I agree with so much of that. You know, you talked about Elliot. I think Elliot, phenomenal talent, technically fantastic, going to be a brilliant player. You forget he's still a teenager. Maybe some of the tactical kind of aspects of the game are still lacking a little bit, even being totally honest. Don't want to sound too critical. That doesn't mean he's a bad player. Just, you know, still learning the trade a little bit, which is to be expected at that age. Like, it shows how good he is that he's playing in the first team, but ultimately, you know, he's still learning. And yeah, I think all that this is kind of a cocktail that has made Liverpool just a little less fluid going forward and a little bit more vulnerable without the ball. Seemingly consistently giving away kind of really big counter-attack opportunities.
I mean, we saw it against Newcastle, didn't we? We saw one or two where Alexander Isak got inside and made use of them and scored both of his only two opportunities, really. One of them got ruled out, obviously, and he was only marginally offside. But Carragher touches on it quite often. Liverpool seem to give away one or two of those every game, and we've kind of started to view it as the norm almost, but it's probably not.
No,
it's probably not what you want, really, is it?
Yeah, I have really. I've not been on the show since I've kind of changed my view on this, but I'm actually so my view traditionally, and I imagine it mirrors yours because we talk so much about football. My view has always been it's kind of like as a consequence of how Liverpool play, you know, they're going to give up these big chances every so often because they play. I mean, Pep Lijnders, I'm sure, has said he wants to play in something like all the play front to back within 18 yards of each other, which is an insanely small area of the pitch to have all your players together. But we know why. Press really aggressively, kind of compact space, difficult to play out of, hopefully go long, give it back to Liverpool, start again. I get all that, but I had a look at the numbers last season for the piece just before the Champions League final, and Liverpool give up something like 52 1-against-1 opportunities, which was the highest in the Premier League, more than Norwich, you know, name a team, it was worse than them. And I thought, okay, stylistically, who's the closest to Liverpool in the Premier League? Because style does, play a factor. And Manchester City was the obvious one. And they'd give up about 34. So I was like, that is a big difference. And, you know, you're kind of relying on Alisson to just continually, you know, pull off big saves. And if he comes out the team or if his form dips a little bit, you know, you're going to start conceding goals, and goals obviously impact results. And especially this season, seeing more of it, I'm like, I'm starting to think, basically, Josh, to summarise, that it's a little bit more expensive and maybe not as worthwhile as I thought it was. And it was when Carragher said that line about a week or two ago that it just doesn't feel right. I kind of found myself agreeing with him. I was like, it's a fair point, you know. You shouldn't be given that many clear-cut chances, 1v1s against your goalkeeper. I think it's a problem.
Yeah, I do think it's them. I think a lot of those 1v1s kind of originate from that channel between Trent and whoever's playing next to Van Dijk, basically. So I think a lot of it does stem from Trent's role in the team, where he's expected to pop up on the pitch when Liverpool have the ball. You know, sometimes he's popping up in like De Bruyne kind of areas and things like that, coming much further inside than Robertson does. He's not as quick as Robertson either in terms of his recovery pace. So I think that's if you was to look at like the perfect way in which you would form Liverpool's system, you'd probably have Trent where doing what he usually does, Salah doing what he usually does, and you'd probably like the right-sided centre mid for Liverpool to be an absolute Kante, you know, someone like that who's just gonna do like a Tchouaméni, funnily enough, someone who's just gonna hoover up Everton and just kind of let the other two just go mad almost on the attacking side of the game. But I think because Liverpool are managing with an aging version of Jordan Henderson, and now Harvey Elliott, who is, I think, still a teenager and by nature is more attack-minded than defensive. I think Elliott was the best player on the pitch against Newcastle, by the way. I'm not criticising him in any way. But in terms of the makeup of Liverpool's team, you probably want just a defensive master, basically, on the right side of Liverpool's midfield. And we haven't really had that, which I think is part of the reason why we every now and then we can see these big 1v1s. But looking at the numbers anyway, the numbers don't hate Liverpool in any way. I mean, the numbers are still pretty good across the board, really. So in terms of expected goals so far this season, excluding penalties, Liverpool are third. And in terms of behind only City and Arsenal, by the way. And in terms of the defensive side of the game, Liverpool are fifth at the minute. Sorry, no, they're not. Hang on, let me just fix that. Put on per match basis. Liverpool are, well, yeah, joint fourth. It can get better defensively because City's defense is almost half as good as anybody else's, apart from Arsenal at the minute. Everyone's had these different fixtures, so the numbers can change a lot and things. So I don't think it's like by any means where Liverpool are going to start drifting out the top four and like that, any of that nonsense. I don't think it's that bad. I'm just not sure Liverpool are anywhere near title winning level just yet, based on their evidence in the first couple of games.
I'd probably agree. I guess the only positive thing from a Liverpool perspective is I do anticipate that that's probably going to settle down. And you'd rather be like this now at the beginning of the season with so much football still to play for them. Maybe 6 months down the line. So yeah, I mean, it just what we're talking about now ties into the original comment that Liverpool have just been a bit weird at the start of the season. They've just been a bit strange.
I mean, a lot of that you can put down to like lots of injuries, red card to Darwin Núñez, Van Dijk giving away a penalty, extremely uncharacteristic things that we would usually see when it comes to Liverpool. And you're obviously instigating a few new players. You've lost Mane, so I think you could probably describe our start of the season as a little bit turbulent. And based on those things I've just listed, it's almost to be expected. It's just a bit, I suppose, frustrating that it can rule you out of the title race so quickly. But anyway, Liverpool have won 2 games in a row. It's by no means over and like that, but Liverpool have to get back to their usual level performance-wise on the weekend, Dave. Against Everton, Frank Lampard's Everton, who I think I'm right in saying are winless at the minute. Is that right?
Correct, winless. Thanks for pointing that out, Josh.
Yeah, but the crucial thing though, is it deservedly winless, or should they have a bit more to the name?
So this is what's quite funny. Oh, by the way, I'm going to point it out now, so then when people are watching it, they can laugh and know that I'm aware of it. But I am getting blinded at the moment by the sun in me. Like it's insane.
I thought that was your brain lighting up, to be honest.
yeah, something like that, mate. But Everton are really. Oh no! See, what happens is when I speak about Everton, mate, the light fades from my brain, and it goes quite the opposite way. But yeah, Everton are strange because they obviously winless so far. And anybody who knows me, regular listeners to this show or maybe other shows or follow me on social media, I'm definitely not an Everton cheerleader. I won't just kind of positively spin things in their favour. It's quite the opposite, actually, to be honest. Because they're quite an irritating club at times in the way they're running things. But that being said, I do think there's a lot of caveats to what's happened so far this season. And I think they're probably a little bit better than... I mean, what might be good, Josh, if I talk now and then maybe you bring up the general Premier League numbers and you can have a little gander at them in a minute.
Yeah, I'm actually doing that now, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, they started the season with a 1-0 defeat to Chelsea, which was via a penalty. There wasn't really nothing in that game. Penalty decided it. Strange game against Aston Villa, who obviously a lot of Liverpool fans will know. Gerrard struggling there. Got beat 2-1 again. And then 3 consecutive 1-1 draws against Forest, Brentford and Leeds. And the reason I say there's a few caveats is they've come into the season without a centre forward. And I don't flag that as just an issue in terms of being able to score goals, although it is a big one. I think it's an issue in terms of your actual team structure. It's really difficult when you don't have any sort of focal point. Even if you think of like great sides who haven't always operated with a number 9, we'll use the best example, Liverpool. Up until before Núñez come in, they had the flu of front 3, but Firmino still was in many ways, although not in a traditional way. He was that kind of focal point to attacks, wasn't he? And haven't really haven't had that. We have to play like Gray and Gordon. I think it just really hindered them. So they've kind of been playing a bit of a counter-attacking game. But I have to say, Josh, I don't know if you caught them this week. They looked very dangerous against Leeds. Probably should have won that game. They had a very similar goal disallowed to what Newcastle's goal that was disallowed. Really tight VAR call. At Brentford, they conceded with a couple of minutes to go. I think that the first wins have aided them a little bit, but with maybe a little bit more luck, they would have picked up 1 or 2 victories by now.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Everton's numbers now for the first time really this season. 5 games in, so it's a very small sample size, massive red flag there, but we can only look at what we've got anyway. And I'm quite surprised that Everton are actually not that bad on the attacking side. Considering they don't have a striker, they are posing a bit of a threat. So if you look at just general shots, they're about 8th, both joint 8th in terms of shots per 90 shots per match or whatever. And in terms of expected goals, they are about the same. So on the attacking side of the game, they don't look like they're completely toothless. What the issue is, by the looks of it, is putting the ball in the net, and that seems to be where the issue of no striker is coming in. Because in terms of finishing, Everton currently bottom of the league for expected goals over performance or underperformance. Currently, 3.2 goals behind expectation. Everton at the minute, so they haven't really converted the shots very well at all. For a bit of perspective on that, at the opposite end of the scale, you got Man City top and Liverpool second, both being really clinical when it comes to putting the ball in the net when you're trying to convert shots into goals. But defensively, maybe a little bit weaker, closer to the bottom of the table in terms of shots faced, in terms of expected goals faced as well. So, bit of a weird one actually, because when I've been watching Everton, they do look committed. Maybe is the word. They do look on board with whatever they're trying to do. They're not getting rolled over. They're not, just pathetic anymore. Basically, they do look like they're applying themselves. But defensively, they look worse than they do on the attacking side of the game, which I'm a little bit surprised by.
Yeah, I do wonder though if some of that in some way alludes to or hints at the fact that they do see the way they've been having to set up without having that focal point in attack. They've got only Fulham and Bournemouth have had lower possession than them so far. And obviously, if you're playing in a way where you're not looking to kind of dominate the ball, you're looking to sit deep, invite pressure on, then hit teams on the counter. Inevitably you're going to give up a few more shots as well. So I do agree with the kind of assessments of them defensively. I just think maybe one explanation for that could be where the way they've been setting up and how that can kind of impact it a little bit. Inviting their pressure on a little bit more, and as a result, giving up more shots on the goal.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Everton's system, they do seem to have moved towards a back 3 or back 5, whatever you want to call it. Although it was a 4 against Leeds, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a switch.
Any reason for that?
No, I think what's happened is maybe he's had an idea, but then they had Monpai was meant to be playing, and I can't remember why he
Oh,
wasn't. It's something to do with paperwork, so I wonder if maybe he's just thought, right, let's switch the system and go with something else.
yeah. I mean, is there any immediate? I mean, Anana looks decent. Anana looks like an alright signing. Good age, well regarded. I think he offers a bit of stability in the middle of the park. About 6'5", is he? Something like that.
Yeah, he looks a good piece of business actually. I have to say, for all we've talked at length over the years, me and you, Josh, on podcasts about Everton's recruitment, and shock, it hasn't been positive talk. But I actually think, and I appreciate we're going to be looking at it. Many people will be looking at this from a Liverpool perspective, so there's a maybe being a little bit more inclined to find some of this business underwhelming, which you get. But maybe if you can kind of put yourself in the position of where Everton were last season and then coming into the summer, I actually think they've not done business too bad. They've brought in Onana, who I think is a really good, strong midfielder. We just touched on Mumpai from Brighton, who we know in the analytical world, he's never looked a fantastic finisher, but I do think he can be a handful. But I think that the centre backs in particular, Tarkowski, Cody, you brought those two defenders in for nothing. One was a free transfer, one was a loan move. I think for a team like Everton, who aren't going to be playing on the halfway line, I think that's a much more robust defensive pair, and it's certainly at very least, I think a mid-table kind of defensive duo.
Yeah, one thing I am glad to see when I say glad, I mean this is supposed to be a Liverpool podcast, so we shouldn't be glad. But one
From a
thing I do think that,
footballing perspective.
yeah, from a sensible perspective, let's say one thing I do think they're getting right finally is they seem to be settling on a system and recruiting based on the needs of that system and the profiles you need to execute that system. And it's coincided with, I think it's Kevin Thelwell, is it, as the director of football there now.
Yeah, that's right.
He's wrote a thesis actually in the past on, I think it was an entire thesis on the 3-5-2, and he was a director of football at Wolves when Nuno was constructing his 3-5-2. I think it was a 3-5-2. It was definitely a back three under Espirito Santo, and he got Neves and Moutinho and the likes of Johnny also at wing back and things like that. And I think Everton now, it's interesting, they're moving towards a back three, and they've got like Anana's come in. They've got Patterson and Michaelenko as wing backs potentially now moving forward. So I think if Everton keep if Lampard sticks with that system and Everton keep recruiting players for that system, I think the recruitment should naturally improve because you've got more of a clear vision to what you're working towards. But yeah, I mean, we'll have to leave it there because we're getting a little bit carried away here. But in terms of predictions, mate, we're going to do it. So what are you saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still pretty confident Liverpool win the game. But I expect it to be, based on what we've seen so far, I expect a tight game, small margins. The way Liverpool have been at the moment, probably not a clean sheet for them. They seem to give up a goal. So maybe I'll give Everton one goal, but I just expect Liverpool to at least find two. So, I'll go with tight. Liverpool win 2-1.
Just before I give my prediction, have you got any thoughts on Núñez making his return for this game?
Yeah,
I saw a clip yesterday. Absolutely genius. I thought someone posted a clip of a WWE Royal Rumble, and mid Royal Rumble, the Stone Cold music comes in, and he just comes in and starts ruining everybody basically, and it's kind of like Núñez's return has coincided with a Merseyside derby at Goodison. Like what could go wrong type thing.
Yeah, no, it seems written in the stars a little bit on that he'll come in.
Are you worried in any way, or?
Yeah, because I think he's a massive handful. I also don't expect him to start because of the way Firmino's played the last two games. So, the prospect of him potentially coming into the game for the last 30 minutes, I think that would be a daunting prospect because he's something completely different to what you spent an hour trying to defend.
Yeah, I agree. I think he has the potential to really change the game when he comes on. I think he could be a handful and he could be a real difference maker, actually. But generally, my prediction is I'm actually going to go 1-1.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go 1-1 because Goodison Park's a difficult place to play. And Liverpool's build-up game, especially at the minute, has not been great. The midfielders are maybe a little bit hesitant to actually get on the ball and receive the ball in deeper areas sometimes. And Anthony Gordon was a nightmare for us last season, and that was when we were well equipped to deal with him. Now we're a little bit less equipped. So I wouldn't be surprised if Everton somehow sneak one. Liverpool dominate the game, manage to score one themselves, but can't really win the game. And it's an early kick-off and all that, away from home. My only hope is around the hour mark. Nunes does something in terms of causing havoc where he ends up scoring the winner or something like that. But I think it could be a really tight, niggly, horrible game, to be honest.
Like the often are at Goodison.
Yeah. I mean, Frank Lampard's already got history with Liverpool's bench as well. So I don't know. It's going to be one of them games, I think. I'm looking forward to it. It's the early kickoff, mate. I hate the early kickoffs.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I never enjoy it. No. I might not get to see it anyway.
Thanks for joining us anyway, Dave.
Yeah, no problem, mate. Thanks for having me, I guess.
Yeah, it's good to see you back. We'll see you next month.
And
yeah, listeners, thanks for tuning in. And we'll be back next. Well, no, we won't actually. I'm away next week, so we won't have a podcast. But the week after, we'll be back on the podcast. So yeah, tune in then, and we'll see you then. Thanks for tuning in.